The first rule of interrogation was simple: control the room before the room controls you. Armin Hale had built his entire career on that rule. 37 successful extractions. 0 psychological breaches. He didn't just read people, he dismantled them, piece by piece, until the truth had nowhere left to hide. Which was why the moment she spoke, without him saying a single word, something inside him fractured. He hadn't asked a question yet. He hadn't even sat down. But the woman across the reinforced glass tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something no one else could hear, and said quietly, "You think I'm pretending to be calm?" Armin froze. Not visibly. Not enough for the observers behind the one-way panel to flag it. His posture remained precise, controlled, deliberate. But inside, something sharp and cold slid down his spine. Because that wasn't a guess. That was exactly what he'd thought. He stepped forward slowly, placing the file on the metal table between them. No reaction. No acknowledgement. Just procedure. Always procedure. "You've been briefed on why you're here," he said, voice steady, measured. She didn't answer. Her eyes, unnervingly still, impossibly focused, remained locked on him, not with hostility, not with fear, but with something worse. Recognition. Armin continued, unfazed on the surface. "You will answer questions clearly and directly. Any resistance?" "You're not actually worried about resistance," she interrupted softly. Another pause. Smaller this time. Sharper. "You're worried," she added, almost curiously, "that you won't be able to control this." Silence filled the room, thick and immediate. Behind the glass, someone shifted. Armin didn't look back. Instead, he pulled out the chair and sat down across from her, slower than necessary, buying time without appearing to. His mind was already recalibrating, running through possibilities. Behavioral prediction. Pattern recognition. Micro-expression reading. There were explanations. There were always explanations. "You've studied interrogation tactics," he said, watching her carefully now. "Psychological mirroring. Projection. It's common." Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "No," she said. "You're doing it again." A beat. "You're building explanations you don't believe," she continued. "You always do that when something doesn't fit." Armin's pulse ticked once. Hard. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't reacted. But somehow, she had just reached into the one place no training could fully shield. He leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the table, gaze sharpening. "Then explain it to me," he said. For the first time, she looked away, not out of fear, not out of submission, but as if the answer itself required careful handling. When her eyes returned to his, something had changed. "Careful, Armin Hale," she said quietly. "You don't want me to start answering that." A faint hum filled the air, systems adjusting, observers leaning in, something unseen tightening its grip on the moment. Armin held her gaze. He had broken hundreds of minds. But for the first time in his life, he had the distinct, creeping realization. He might be the one being opened. And was. He had no idea how much she could already see. Armin did not move for 3 full seconds. It wasn't hesitation. It was discipline. Every instinct in his body was already screaming to react, to challenge, to push, to regain control. But instinct was exactly what got people broken in rooms like this. So he let the silence stretch, let it sharpen, let it become a weapon again. Then he spoke. "You used my name," he said calmly. "That wasn't provided to you. It was a test. A simple one. Information containment." Her answer came immediately. "You're thinking about how that's a breach," she said, her voice almost conversational. "How someone made a mistake, or how I found it somewhere I shouldn't have." Another beat. "You're also considering that it doesn't matter," she added, softer now. "Because what actually scares you is how I knew what you were thinking before you asked anything at all." The air shifted again, barely noticeable, but real. Armin's fingers tightened imperceptibly against the edge of the table. He forced them still. His breathing remained even, measured, controlled. Control the room. Except the room was starting to feel unstable. He leaned back slightly, changing posture, creating distance. A subtle reset. "Let's simplify this," he said. "You claim you can access my thoughts." "I didn't say that." The interruption was immediate, clean, precise. Armin's eyes narrowed slightly. "You implied it." "I corrected you," she replied. A pause. Then, deliberately, "You're testing definitions now. Trying to pin this into something measurable." Her gaze didn't waver. But it won't fit. That was new. Not denial. Not confirmation. Something worse, refusal to be categorized. Armin shifted tactics. His mind pivoted rapidly, deliberately flooding itself with noise. Random sequences. Irrelevant data. Old case files. Numbers. Patterns. Anything to break signal integrity, anything to create static. If she was reading thoughts, then overwhelm the channel. He held her gaze while doing it. 7. Delta 9. Broken lock. Rain on metal. The smell of. You're getting louder. The words landed like a quiet detonation. Armin stopped. Not the thoughts. Those were still spiraling. But something inside him stilled, sharply. You think if you make enough noise, I won't find anything useful, she continued, tilting her head slightly. But that's not how it works. A flicker of something, interest? Amusement, crossed her expression. I don't hear everything. That mattered. Armin leaned forward again, slower this time, more deliberate. His voice lowered, sharpened. What do you hear? For the first time since the interrogation began, she hesitated. Not long. Not weak. But real. And that was enough to confirm one thing. There were limits. I hear the things you bury, she said finally. The room seemed to contract around that sentence. Armin didn't speak. Didn't move. Because something about the way she said it, it wasn't invasive. It was precise. You're not thinking about your training right now, she added quietly. Not really. You're thinking about control. About what happens if you lose it. Her eyes locked onto his with unsettling clarity. And more than that, she said, softer now, almost careful, you're wondering which parts of you I'll find if I keep looking. A cold weight settled in his chest. Because that thought. He hadn't fully formed it. Not consciously. Armin exhaled slowly, steadying himself. That's still just observation, he said. Pattern reading. Behavioral inference. He needed it to be. He needed rules. She studied him for a moment. Then, very gently, she shook her head. You're still doing it, she said. Doing what? Building walls, she replied. Even now. Her gaze flicked, just for a fraction of a second, to the glass behind him. Then back. And they're already too late. That made Armin pause. Not because of what she said. But because of what she implied. You're not here for answers, she continued, her voice lowering slightly. You were never going to get them from me. Another shift. Subtle. Dangerous. You're here because something is coming, she said. A beat. And I'm the only one who can tell you what you're going to become when it does. The words didn't sound like a threat. They sounded like a warning. And for the first time since entering the room, Armin Hale felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Not fear. Not yet. But something dangerously close. Because the question wasn't whether she could hear him anymore. The question was, why did it feel like she already knew what he was going to do next? Armin had spent years studying deception, but there was something fundamentally wrong about a situation where the lie wasn't in what someone said, but in what they hadn't allowed themselves to think yet. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he let the silence return, slower this time, heavier, deliberate. Silence had always been his advantage. Most people rushed to fill it. Most people cracked under it. She didn't. She simply watched him, as if the silence itself was another language she understood better than he did. Behind the glass, he could feel the weight of observation. Analysts. Supervisors. People who still believed this was a standard interrogation. It wasn't. And the more they treated it like one, the more dangerous it became. You said something is coming, Armin said finally, his tone even, controlled. That implies external knowledge. A threat. Start there. Direct. Grounded. Logical. Human. Her gaze softened, not with sympathy, but with something closer to interest. You want it to be external, she said. I want clarity. No, she replied quietly. You want distance. That word lingered. Distance. Armin's jaw tightened slightly, though his expression remained neutral. Then remove it, he said. Explain. She leaned back slightly, studying him in a way that felt less like observation and more like calibration. You're very good at separating things, she said. Facts from feelings. Action from intent. You've trained yourself to believe those lines are real. Her head tilted slightly. They're not. Something in his chest shifted. Subtle, unwelcome. Armin ignored it. Stay on topic, he said. I am. A pause. Then she continued, her voice quieter now, but more precise. What's coming isn't something arriving, she said. It's something emerging. Armin's eyes narrowed. From where? She held his gaze. From you. The words landed cleanly. No drama. No emphasis. Which made them infinitely worse. Armin didn't react, not outwardly. But internally, something resisted immediately, aggressively. That's not possible. That's projection. That's. You see, she said softly. His thoughts stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. You didn't finish it, she continued. You pulled back before the conclusion. A beat. You do that a lot. The observation wasn't accusatory. It was familiar. Armin leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. This time, there was no attempt to hide the intensity in his gaze. Then finish it for me, he said. Her eyes flickered, just once. Another hesitation. Another boundary. I don't complete your thoughts, she said carefully. I don't create them. Then what do you do? She exhaled slowly, as if choosing the least dangerous version of the truth. I hear the direction they're trying to go, she said. Before you let them. That changed everything. Armin felt it immediately. Because that meant. You're not reading thoughts, he said slowly. You're reading intent. Not exactly. Her answer came softer this time. Less certain. Or maybe more precise. Intent can still change, she explained. What I hear is what resists change. Armin went still. There it was again. That precision. That unnatural, surgical accuracy. You filter yourself constantly, she continued. Every human does. You think thousands of things you never act on. You discard them, reshape them, suppress them. Her gaze sharpened slightly. But some thoughts don't disappear. A pause. They wait. The word echoed in the space between them. Armin felt something tighten in his chest, not panic, not fear, but recognition. And he hated that. You're suggesting, he said slowly, that what you're hearing isn't what I think. His voice lowered. But what I'm avoiding. She didn't answer immediately. Which, somehow, was worse than if she had. When she finally spoke, her voice carried something new. Not curiosity. Not amusement. Something closer to certainty. You're starting to understand, she said. Silence followed. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of something building. Because if she wasn't hearing thoughts, if she was hearing what he refused to face, then this wasn't interrogation anymore. It was exposure. And worse. It meant every decision he thought he had already made might not be his final one. Armin leaned back slowly, exhaling through his nose, forcing his body to remain calm. Control the room. Except now, the room wasn't the problem. He was. And across from him, sitting in perfect stillness, was someone who wasn't trying to break him. She was waiting for him to break himself. You said I was chosen, Armin said quietly. Her eyes met his again. Yes. A beat. Chosen for what? For the first time since this began. She didn't answer. But the silence that followed felt different. Heavier. Loaded. Because this time, it wasn't that she wouldn't answer. It was that. Somehow. He already knew. He just hadn't let himself think it yet. The directive came through before Armin could ask another question. A low chime pulsed in the room, sharp, controlled, unmistakably authoritative. The kind of sound that didn't interrupt, it overrode. He didn't turn toward the glass. He didn't need to. Proceed to extraction protocol, the voice said through the embedded system, calm and distant. Priority escalation authorized. Armin remained still. For anyone watching, it looked like compliance. The perfect operative receiving orders. The perfect mind returning to structure. But something inside him resisted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. She heard it. You don't agree with them, she said quietly. Armin ignored her. He tapped the console beside him, pulling up the interrogation interface. Data streams, biometric feedback, neural response overlays, tools he had mastered long ago. Tools that suddenly felt primitive. Subject will respond to directed questioning, he said, voice steady, slipping back into role. Non-compliance will result in corrective measures. It was procedure. It was control. It was everything he understood. And none of it mattered. You're trying to become smaller, she said, watching him. Simpler. Easier to manage. His jaw tightened. Answer the questions, he said. A pause. Then, unexpectedly, she complied. My designation is irrelevant, she said. My origin will not help you. What you want is prediction. Armin's eyes sharpened. Then give it. Her gaze held his, unwavering. You're going to be asked to do something you've never done before, she said. And you're going to hesitate. Behind the glass, someone shifted. Armin felt it. Authority listening. Waiting. Measuring. Hesitation is failure, he said flatly. That's what you've been trained to believe. It's what's real. No, she said softly. It's what keeps you useful. The words landed harder than they should have. Because they didn't feel like an attack. They felt like a diagnosis. Armin's fingers hovered over the interface. A single command would escalate the session. Increase pressure. Strip resistance. Force response. He had done it before. Dozens of times. Without hesitation. Without doubt. Now. He paused. Just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. There, she whispered. His hand stilled. You felt it, she said. Armin's eyes narrowed. Felt what? That moment where you didn't follow through, she replied. The gap between what you were told to do, and what you actually wanted to do. His pulse hit once. Hard. You're imagining it. No, she said gently. You're ignoring it. Silence pressed in again. But this time, it wasn't just between them. It extended outward. Into the observation room. Into the system. Into the people who were now watching something they couldn't fully control. Armin lowered his hand slowly. Why me? He asked. The question came out quieter than expected. More honest. Her expression shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. You already know the answer, she said. No. You just haven't accepted it. Frustration flared, sharp, immediate. Then say it. She studied him for a long moment. And for the first time, there was something like hesitation in her eyes. Not uncertainty. Restraint. If I say it, she said carefully, you won't be able to pretend anymore. A beat. And right now, that's the only thing keeping you stable. The room felt colder. Armin leaned forward again, this time with no pretense of control. Say it. Her gaze locked onto his. You're not here to stop what's coming, she said. The words came slow. Measured. Precise. You're here to decide if it should happen. The world seemed to narrow around that sentence. Armin didn't move. Didn't blink. Because something inside him. Something buried deep beneath training, beneath logic, beneath identity. Reacted. Not with rejection. Not with denial. With recognition. And that terrified him more than anything she'd said so far. Behind the glass, the system chimed again. Sharper this time. More urgent. Agent Hale, the voice returned, firmer now. Execute escalation protocol immediately. The command hung in the air. Clear. Final. Unavoidable. Armin's hand moved. Slowly. Not toward the interface. Toward the table. Toward her. He didn't touch her. Didn't cross the line. But he got close enough to feel it. That strange, almost imperceptible tension in the air around her. Like standing at the edge of something vast and unseen. You said I would hesitate, he murmured. Her eyes softened slightly. Yes. And after that? A pause. This one longer. Heavier. More dangerous. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. After that, you choose. Another chime. Louder now. Final warning, the system announced. Armin didn't look away from her. Didn't break focus. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about the mission. He wasn't thinking about the consequences. He wasn't even thinking about control. He was thinking about something far more dangerous. What if they were wrong? And worse, what if she wasn't? The third warning didn't sound like a command. It sounded like a countdown. Override authorization pending, the system announced, colder now, stripped of pretense. Failure to comply will result in direct intervention. Armin didn't move. Not toward the console. Not toward the door. Not toward the authority pressing down on him from behind reinforced glass and layered command structures. He stayed exactly where he was, leaning slightly forward, eyes locked on hers, as if the rest of the facility had already begun to fade. Because something had shifted. Not in the room. In him. You feel it now, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Armin exhaled slowly, controlled, but the control felt thinner than it had minutes ago. Say it clearly, he said. No fragments. No implications. Her gaze held his. You want the truth, she said. Yes. A pause. Then. You are the event. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed with a kind of stillness that swallowed everything else. Armin's expression didn't change. But something inside him did. A subtle fracture. Not visible. Not audible. But real. That's not possible, he said. The response came automatically. Clean. Immediate. Built from years of conditioning. And yet, it lacked something. Conviction. You've been trained to think of events as external, she replied. Threats. Anomalies. Disruptions that come from outside your system. Her head tilted slightly. But what happens when the system itself changes? Armin's mind moved, fast, precise, searching for structure, for grounding. This is misdirection, he said. You're reframing the scenario to destabilize. No, she interrupted, softer this time. I'm describing what you already know. His jaw tightened. I don't. You do. The certainty in her voice didn't rise. It deepened. You've been noticing it, she continued. For months. That made him pause. Not visibly. But internally, something reacted. A flicker. Unwanted. Uninvited. You've been making decisions before you understand why, she said. Adjusting behavior before you consciously evaluate it. Choosing outcomes that don't align with your training. Her eyes sharpened slightly. You call it instinct. A beat. It's not. The room seemed to narrow. Armin felt it, an internal pressure, subtle but undeniable. Because there were moments. Small ones. Insignificant on their own. But now they were lining up. Patterns forming. You're still filtering, she said, watching him closely. Trying to reject the parts that don't fit. His voice came lower now. Then explain them. She didn't hesitate this time. You're not reacting to events, she said. You're aligning with them. A pause. You feel outcomes before they happen. That hit harder. Because it wasn't entirely wrong. And that was the problem. That's predictive conditioning, he said, but the words felt thinner now. Pattern recognition. Training. No. The interruption was immediate. Final. You're not predicting, she said. You're converging. The word hung there. Unfamiliar. Uncomfortable. What does that mean? He asked. For the first time? She leaned forward, closing the space between them. You don't choose between possibilities, she said quietly. You move toward the one that becomes real. Armin went still. Completely still. Because something in that sentence, something in the structure of it, resonated. Deep. Dangerously deep. You've been doing it longer than you realize, she continued. Small decisions. Subtle shifts. But now. Her voice lowered. It's accelerating. Behind the glass, movement intensified. He could feel it without looking. They were seeing it too. Or at least, they were starting to. Why wasn't I told? He asked. Her expression didn't change. Because you wouldn't have believed it. A beat. And because once you do. She stopped. Not because she couldn't continue. Because she was choosing not to. Armin's eyes narrowed. Finish it. She held his gaze. And for the first time, there was something like warning in her eyes. You stop being controllable. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. The system chimed again, louder now, sharper, cutting through the moment. Manual override engaged, the voice announced. Control of subject and agent will be transferred. Armin didn't react. Not to the voice. Not to the shift in authority. Because something far more important had just happened. He wasn't thinking about what they wanted anymore. He wasn't thinking about protocol. Or compliance. Or consequence. He was thinking about her words. About convergence. About alignment. About the possibility. That every choice he had made. Had never really been a choice at all. And if that was true. Then the next one wouldn't be either. Across from him, she watched closely. Not with fear. Not with anticipation. But with something far more unsettling. Recognition. Because she already knew what direction he was moving. The only question left was, Would he finally see it before it was too late? The lights dimmed for half a second. That was all the warning the system gave before control was taken out of human hands. Manual override confirmed, the voice declared, stripped now of any pretense of collaboration. Agent Hale, step back from the subject. Armin didn't move. Not because he was defying them. Because, for the first time, the command didn't register as absolute. Behind the glass, operators moved quickly. He could feel it in the subtle vibration of the floor, the shift in air pressure, the hum of systems redirecting power. The facility was tightening, locking down variables, correcting what it now classified as deviation. He had been the most reliable variable they had. Until now. You're about to lose control, she said quietly. Armin's gaze didn't leave hers. They already did. No, she replied, softer. You did. A sharp hiss cut through the room as restraints embedded in the floor activated, thin magnetic fields snapping into place around the table. Not enough to immobilize, yet, but enough to signal escalation. Final directive, the system announced. Step away or be removed. Armin's mind didn't spike. Didn't panic. That alone should have concerned him more than anything else. Instead, something else was happening. A strange clarity. Not calm. Not detachment. Something sharper. He became aware, painfully aware, of every possible next action. Step back. Comply. Let them take over. Or stay. Engage. Disrupt. The options didn't feel like choices. They felt like paths already laid out in front of him. And one of them felt heavier. Inevitable. You feel it now, she said. It wasn't a question. Armin's fingers curled slowly against the table's edge. I feel interference, he replied. No, she said gently. You feel direction. The word hit deeper this time. Because it wasn't abstract anymore. It was present. Active. You think this is happening to you, she continued. But it's happening because of you. A sharp crack echoed through the ceiling as a panel slid open. Automated units. Containment protocols. They weren't waiting anymore. They're afraid, she said, glancing upward briefly. Not of me. Her eyes returned to his. Of what you're becoming. Armin's jaw tightened. I'm not becoming anything. The denial came fast. Too fast. And they both knew it. You already have, she said. The first containment drone dropped into view, sleek, controlled, silent. It hovered just above the ground, its sensors locking onto both of them instantly. Do not resist, the system commanded. Armin barely registered it. Because something inside him. Something he had been holding back without realizing. Shifted. Not violently. Not dramatically. Just, aligned. Like a piece sliding into place. You're still trying to decide, she said softly. His eyes flicked to her. I am deciding. No, she replied. You're catching up. The drone advanced. A second one followed. Then a third. Precision. Control. Overwhelming force applied with surgical certainty. This was how they handled unknowns. Overwhelm them. Neutralize them. Contain them. Armin stood slowly. Not in response to the command. Not in defiance. But because something told him. He needed to. Every movement felt, pre-known. Not predicted. Recognized. The drones adjusted instantly, recalibrating, targeting. Non-compliance confirmed, the system announced. Escalating force. A faint charge built in the air. Stun protocols. Fast. Efficient. Final. Armin, she said quietly. His name sounded different now. Not like identification. Like grounding. You don't have to fight them, she continued. You just have to stop following them. That didn't make sense. And yet, it did. Because for the first time, Armin realized something critical. Every decision he had ever made had been framed, directed, contained within acceptable outcomes. Even his defiance. Even his resistance. It had all been predictable, controlled. Until now. The first drone fired. The charge crossed the space in less than a second. Armin moved. Not faster. Not stronger. Just, exactly where it wouldn't hit. The blast scorched the wall behind him. The room went still. Not because of the miss. Because of how he moved. There had been no hesitation. No reaction time. No visible calculation. Just alignment. The second drone fired. He shifted again. Seamless. Effortless. Wrong. Behind the glass, someone shouted. The system recalibrated instantly. Anomaly detected. Armin didn't hear it. Or maybe he did. But it didn't matter anymore. Because something inside him had crossed a line he didn't know existed. You see it now, she said, her voice steady, almost calm amidst the chaos. You're not choosing between outcomes. Another drone fired. He stepped, not away, not toward. Just into the only space that remained untouched. They are forming around you, she continued. And you're moving through them. The realization hit him all at once. Not as a thought. As a certainty. He wasn't reacting to the attacks. He was already where they wouldn't land. The drones hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Because systems built on prediction break when something stops being predictable. System instability rising, the voice announced, sharper now, almost strained. Agent Hale, cease movement immediately. Armin stood in the center of the room. Unharmed. Unshaken. Breathing steady. For the first time. Not trying to control anything. Because he didn't need to. Across from him, she watched with something new in her eyes. Not curiosity. Not recognition. Something deeper. Confirmation. You've stopped resisting it, she said. Armin looked at his hands. They felt the same. But they weren't. What am I? He asked quietly. The drones repositioned. Slower now. More cautious. As if they were no longer sure of their own calculations. She met his gaze. And this time. She didn't hesitate. You're what happens, she said, when a human stops reacting, and starts deciding reality instead. The system flickered. Just once. But it was enough to make one thing painfully clear. This wasn't containment anymore. This was escalation. And whatever they thought they were dealing with, it had just become something far more dangerous than they were prepared for. The room did not recover. It recalculated. Every system in the facility shifted from control to correction, from correction to suppression, and now, from suppression to elimination. Armin could feel it in the way the air tightened, in the way the drones no longer hovered with surgical patience but repositioned with something closer to urgency. He had crossed a threshold. Not visibly. Not violently. But undeniably. Threat classification updated, the system announced, its tone stripped of neutrality. Agent Hale is no longer considered stable. A pause. Escalating to full containment. Armin didn't look at the drones. He didn't look at the ceiling. He didn't even look at the glass where the people who once trusted him were now preparing to erase him. He looked at her. Because she wasn't reacting to the escalation. She was watching him. You're still holding back, she said quietly. Armin's brow tightened slightly. I just avoided 3 direct strikes. That's not what I mean. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You're still trying to stay inside their rules, she continued. Even now. That hit harder than anything the system had said. Because it was true. Even in this moment, even after everything, he was still thinking in terms of acceptable outcomes. Minimal force. Controlled response. Survive without breaking structure. Human training. Human limitation. You think if you push further, she said softly, you'll lose yourself. A beat. And you're right. Silence pressed in. Not empty. Heavy. Because that was the line. Not survival. Not authority. Identity. Armin inhaled slowly. For the first time since this began. His thoughts weren't racing. They were narrowing. Focusing. What happens if I don't hold back? He asked. The question was quiet. But it carried weight. Because it wasn't theoretical anymore. She studied him carefully. And for the first time, there was no restraint in her answer. You stop being something they can define. A distant rumble echoed through the structure. Not outside. Inside the system. Containment barriers activating. Sealing layers. Cutting exits. They weren't trying to control the situation anymore. They were trying to trap it. You feel it, don't you? She said. How everything is closing in. Armin nodded once. Yes. And you also feel. She leaned slightly forward. That it doesn't matter. That was the moment. Not the drones. Not the alarms. Not the commands. That realization. The walls weren't closing in on him. They were forming around him. And he was still at the center. Armin Hale, the system announced, louder now, more forceful. Final containment authorization granted. Lethal force permitted. A low hum built in the room. Different from before. Heavier. Irreversible. The drones shifted formation. Not aiming. Locking. Calculating not just where he was, but where he could be. They were learning. Adapting. Trying to predict the unpredictable. Armin exhaled. Slow. Controlled. And then, he stopped trying to control it. The shift was invisible. But absolute. Something inside him released. Not violently. Not recklessly. Just, completely. You've been afraid of this moment, she said. He didn't deny it. Yes. Because you thought this would destroy you. Another breath. Slower now. Deeper. I did. Her gaze softened. It won't, she said. A beat. It will reveal you. The drones fired. Not one. Not three. All of them. Simultaneously. The room became a lattice of converging force, every angle sealed, every escape calculated out of existence. For a normal mind, there was no path. For a trained mind, there was no time. But for Armin, there was something else. Clarity. Not of movement. Of inevitability. He didn't dodge. He didn't react. He stepped. And the attacks weren't there. Not because they missed. Because he wasn't where they resolved. The system stuttered. Just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Because that hesitation, that microsecond of uncertainty, didn't come from him. It came from them. Prediction error, the system reported. Again. Prediction error. Again. The room flickered. Light stuttering. Sensors recalibrating. Because the one thing the system could not process was something that didn't follow probability. Armin stood in the center of it. Untouched. Unshaken. No longer reacting. No longer aligning. Something else entirely. Across from him, she watched. And for the first time, there was no distance in her voice. No analysis. No interpretation. Just truth. You've crossed it, she said. Armin didn't look at the drones. Didn't look at the failing systems. He looked at her. What now? A pause. Not from uncertainty. From wait. Because whatever came next, there was no returning from it. She met his gaze. And this time, there was no softness left. Only certainty. Now, she said quietly. You decide if they get to keep a world that depends on controlling what humans can become. The system surged. Power spiking. Containment failing. Escalation reaching critical. And Armin, for the first time in his life, was no longer asking what he should do. He was deciding what reality would allow. And somewhere deep in the collapsing logic of the system, one final calculation failed to resolve. Because it couldn't answer a question it had never needed to before. What happens when a human stops being predictable and starts becoming inevitable? The system did not collapse all at once. It resisted. Every protocol, every safeguard, every layer of engineered certainty pushed back against what it could not understand. Power surged through the facility in violent pulses, rerouting, compensating, recalculating. The drones didn't retreat, they adapted again, faster now, more aggressive, abandoning precision for saturation. Overwhelm the anomaly. Erase the variable. Restore control. That had always worked. Until now. Armin stood in the center of it, not bracing, not preparing, not even thinking in the way he used to. The chaos unfolding around him no longer felt external. It felt incomplete. Like something waiting for resolution. He understood it then, not as an idea, not as a theory, but as something deeper than thought. They weren't fighting him. They were fighting a future they couldn't predict. And the reason they couldn't predict it was because it hadn't been decided yet. Armin, she said. Her voice cut through everything, not louder, not stronger, but clearer. Like a fixed point in a collapsing system. He turned to her. Not because he needed direction. Because he chose to. They will escalate until there is nothing left, she said. Not because they are cruel. Because they are designed to preserve control at all costs. Another surge rippled through the room. The floor trembled as deeper containment layers activated, sealing sections of the facility, isolating variables, locking pathways. They can't allow uncertainty, she continued. And you are uncertainty. Armin absorbed that. Not defensively. Not reactively. Just, fully. And you? He asked. Her expression didn't change. I was sent to find you. A beat. And to see if you would choose this. The words settled between them with quiet finality. So that was it. Not an accident. Not a coincidence. A test. Not of strength. Of choice. Behind them, the system reached a new threshold. The hum deepened into something harsher, more unstable. Emergency overrides clashed with containment directives, logic loops beginning to fracture under conflicting priorities. Because for the first time, there was no correct outcome. Lethal saturation authorized, the system declared, its voice now edged with something almost human, strain. Final resolution protocol engaged. The drones reformed. Not aiming. Not tracking. They began to flood the space with force, indiscriminate, overwhelming, absolute. No escape. No pattern. No solution. Armin watched it happen. And for the first time, he didn't look for a path through it. Because there wasn't one. Not within their rules. He exhaled slowly. And let the last piece fall into place. All his life, he had been trained to react, to read, to predict, to counter. Every action defined by something external. Every decision shaped by the need to stay within a system that demanded control. Even now. Even here. That instinct had remained. Find the safest move. Minimize damage. Stay within acceptable outcomes. But what if there were no acceptable outcomes? What if the system itself was the limitation? The realization didn't come with fear. It came with clarity. He wasn't here to survive this. He was here to decide what survived. The energy surged. The room filled with light, force, pressure, an overwhelming convergence designed to erase anything within it. Armin didn't move. Not physically. Because movement wasn't the answer anymore. Choice was. And for the first time, he made one without hesitation. Not a reaction. Not an alignment. A decision. The system faltered. Just for a fraction of a second. But in that moment, something impossible happened. The force didn't miss him. It didn't strike him. It failed to resolve. As if reality itself had rejected the outcome. The drones stuttered mid-execution. Their calculations collapsed inward, unable to complete the sequence. The light fractured. The pressure dissipated. Silence followed. Not the absence of sound. The absence of certainty. Armin stood where he had always been. Unharmed. Unmoved. But no longer the same. Around him, the facility struggled to stabilize. Systems rebooted, then failed again. Containment fields flickered, unable to define boundaries that no longer held meaning. Because the system had been built on one assumption. That human behavior could always be predicted. Always be guided. Always be controlled. And now, that assumption was broken. He turned back to her. For the first time since this began. There was no distance between them at all. What happens now? He asked. Her eyes held his. Not with analysis. Not with curiosity. With something far more profound. Relief. That depends, she said softly, on what you believe humans are meant to be. A pause. Because that question. That was the real choice. Not power. Not survival. Identity. Armin looked around the room. At the fractured systems. At the failing control structures. At the world that had been built on keeping things predictable. Safe. Contained. And then he looked back at her. I think, he said slowly, we've been smaller than we're supposed to be. The words settled into the space like something long overdue. Not defiance. Not rebellion. Truth. Her expression shifted, subtle, but unmistakable. Approval. Then it's already begun, she said. Another tremor passed through the facility, not violent this time, but structural. Like something adjusting, not breaking. Adapting. Armin felt it. Not around him. Through him. The future wasn't fixed. It wasn't written. It was open. And for the first time, that wasn't terrifying. It was possibility. He extended his hand toward her. Not as an order. Not as a test. A choice. She looked at it for a moment. Then placed her hand in his. Warm. Real. Certain. Outside the room, alarms still sounded. Systems still struggled. People still tried to understand what had just happened. But inside, there was only one thing that mattered. A human who could no longer be predicted. And a future that could no longer be controlled. And somewhere, deep within the fractured logic of everything that had once defined the limits of possibility, a new pattern began to form. Not one that could be calculated. Not one that could be contained. But one that could only be chosen. Again. And again. And again. Because humanity had just crossed a line it was never supposed to reach. And instead of breaking, it became something more.